Before the world knew him as king, he was just another name in a long list of criminals. But unlike the rest, he didn't rely on brute strength alone. He had something far more dangerous, an unstoppable mind and a heart colder than steel. His real name was Amir Zaman, a man whose very presence sent shivers down the spines of seasoned gangsters and hardened jailers. The title of king wasn't given, it was taken, earned, and carved into the walls of every prison he entered. Amir's journey into darkness began in the slums of a ruthless city, where survival meant making impossible choices. By the age of 15, he was already leading a street gang. At 18, he had orchestrated a multi-million-dollar drug operation. But Amir wasn't interested in just money. He wanted power, and he knew power came from fear, control, and unpredictability. He studied people like a hunter studies prey, understanding their weaknesses, desires, and limits. His ability to manipulate others was terrifying. He could turn enemies into allies, guards into pawns, and silence into a weapon. His capture wasn't the result of a mistake. It was betrayal. One of the very men he trained flipped on him for immunity. But even behind bars, Amir didn't lose his throne. In prison, he didn't just survive. He ruled. The inmates followed him like a cult. Guards respected him. Some even feared him more than the warden. He solved disputes, organized underground trades, and punished betrayal with swift, surgical brutality. In just months, he transformed the prison into his empire. Rival gangs bowed to him. Corrupt officers took his money and obeyed his orders. His influence reached outside the prison walls. Amir Zaman didn't need to escape to be free. He already had control. But for a man like him, control wasn't enough. He wanted to remind the world who he truly was. The king wasn't meant to be caged. He spent years carefully building a reputation as a calm, reformed man, participating in therapy sessions, reading philosophy, even tutoring other inmates. All part of the act. He knew the system, he knew the people, and most importantly, he knew how to wait. His nickname King wasn't shouted, it was whispered. In the darkest corners of the prison, where secrets are traded like currency, his name carried weight. And as rumors spread of an upcoming transfer to a lower security facility, everyone knew something big was coming. The king wasn't planning to escape, he was preparing to take back his crown. This was not just the story of a prisoner. This was the rise of a legend, the beginning of a game that the police never saw coming, a game they were already losing. Amir Zaman, now known throughout the prison as King, understood one simple truth better than anyone else. The strongest prisons aren't made of steel, they're made of belief. If he could manipulate what people believed about him, he could walk right out the front door. So, the illusion began. King started by identifying weak links, the guards who complained about their pay, the ones going through divorce, those desperate for approval or friendship. He offered small gestures, respect, conversation, silence when needed. He never asked for anything, at first. Instead, he became the model inmate. He offered to help in the library. He cleaned without complaint. He broke up fights before they began. The same man who once ruled the underground of the prison was now seen mediating between rival gang members and advising younger inmates to avoid violence. The warden, a seasoned officer hardened by decades of dealing with manipulators, watched King with suspicion. But King never flinched. He showed humility. He expressed regret for his past. During a televised rehabilitation program, he looked straight into the camera and said, "I was lost, but this place saved me. I just want to be better." The public loved it. The prison board saw it as a rare success story. What no one realized was that every word, every gesture, every single tear was rehearsed like a performance. Behind this carefully curated mask, King was orchestrating something far more dangerous. He began placing people, his loyal followers, into strategic roles. One got a job in the kitchen, another became a janitor near the main entrance. One of the guards he befriended got transferred to the medical unit. Each move was a piece of a puzzle only King could see. He used coded messages during chess games, small hand gestures during religious meetings, and hidden notes inside food packages. He never gave direct orders. He never raised suspicion. Everything was subtle, perfectly timed, and impossible to trace back to him. The illusion was so complete that even rival gang leaders who once feared him now believed he had softened. Some even mocked him, and King welcomed it. He wanted to be underestimated. He needed them to believe he was done fighting, done leading, done planning. Meanwhile, he created blueprints, hand-drawn from memory and observation, of the prison's routine. He timed guard rotations, memorized camera blind spots, and tracked supply delivery schedules. Every detail mattered. Every moment was logged in his mind like a general preparing for war. He even faked a minor illness to get access to the infirmary, quietly unlocking a cabinet and replacing a key with a duplicate. The nurse smiled, unaware she had just been used in the biggest deception the prison had ever seen. Zaman had changed, but in truth he had never stopped being king. He simply wore a better mask. The stage was set, the players were in place, and soon the illusion would shatter, with a bang the world would never forget. For Amir Zaman, deception wasn't just a tactic, it was an art form. His greatest trick wasn't escaping the prison walls. It was making everyone inside them believe he never would. The king had laid the foundation. Now it was time to execute his masterpiece. He began using subtle psychological manipulation to twist the minds of those in key positions. One guard, a lonely man going through a bitter custody battle, suddenly found himself comforted by King's kind words and generous gifts slipped through hidden hands. Another, a young rookie desperate for approval, was flattered when King praised his integrity and work ethic. King never threatened. He never raised his voice. He made people want to help him, often without realizing they were being used. Bribes came in clever forms, small tips on sports bets that mysteriously won, an expensive watch lost and then found, envelopes passed through third parties. He didn't pay for loyalty. He made people feel like they owed him something. Once the chessboard was fully set, he launched the ultimate move, a fake medical emergency. On a cold morning, King collapsed in the yard, shaking violently, foaming at the mouth. Inmates screamed for help. Guards rushed in. The infirmary was alerted. Doctors, in panic, rolled him into the emergency room, trying to stabilize his heartbeat. He had swallowed a controlled dose of medication, just enough to mimic a seizure, not enough to kill. To them, it looked real. Even the cameras caught what appeared to be a man dying. He was declared critical. Preparations were made for a transfer to an outside hospital, but that was never part of the real plan. Instead, the deception deepened. King had planted his double, an inmate with a similar build, wrapped in bandages and face masks, ready to be wheeled out under tight guard. Meanwhile, the real King slipped into the prison morgue, wearing a stolen lab coat and mask, hidden beneath a gurney pushed by one of his bribed allies. The switch was flawless. Confusion erupted when the transport team realized King wasn't King at all. But by then, Amir Zaman was already gone, out of uniform, out of the prison, and off the radar. It was a masterclass in deception, a game of psychological warfare. Every guard was a pawn, every decision calculated. The security system, studied, the medical logs, altered. Even the timing of the escape was aligned with a prison-wide maintenance blackout, a coincidental power glitch that lasted exactly 8 minutes. By the time the prison realized they had been tricked, King was 10 steps ahead, already gone like smoke in the wind. What followed was chaos, investigations, suspensions, media outrage. But King had left no fingerprints, no trace, no witnesses. Just a message carved into the wall of his cell. Checkmate. To the authorities, it was a disaster. To Amir Zaman, it was a perfectly played game. And it wasn't over yet. It was a night like any other, or so it seemed. The air inside the prison felt heavier than usual. Unspoken tension clung to the walls like dust. But no one noticed. No one ever noticed when King moved. For weeks, Amir Zaman had orchestrated every detail down to the second. The guards followed the same patterns. The night crew was always half asleep. The cameras in corridor C4 glitched every Thursday night. And on this night, all the elements aligned. 9:58 p.m. The lights flickered. Maintenance had warned about a minor systems update, but no one cared. Power outages were common. Nothing new. But this one wasn't an accident, it was timed. A blackout that lasted precisely 6 minutes, just enough. At 10:01 p.m., a guard found a dead rat in the kitchen's storage area. As routine demanded, all areas near the food prep had to be cleared and sanitized. That guard never realized he'd been lured into a diversion. Meanwhile, deep in the infirmary, King was already in motion. The medical emergency he'd faked earlier had placed him exactly where he needed to be. In a storage room, wearing a stolen guard's uniform and carrying forged papers, he moved like a shadow, calm, silent, invisible. One by one, doors opened, not with force, but with keys. Keys provided by people who owed him, feared him, or simply didn't know better. In the control room, an officer watching security monitors. His eyes blurred. His focus slipped. By the time he noticed the flicker of movement on camera, the image froze. 10:06 p.m. King passed through a maintenance tunnel, one he'd studied for months. Narrow, dark, and damp, but it led to freedom. On the other end, waiting like clockwork, was a supply truck. The driver? A former inmate King had helped on the inside, now repaid in full. By the time the alarms finally rang at 10:17 p.m., King was already miles away, sitting calmly in the back of the truck, peeling an orange as if he had all the time in the world. Back inside the prison, chaos exploded, sirens, screams, orders shouted through radios. The warden stormed into King's cell, expecting to find a trace. But there was no panic, no mess, only a note taped to the wall. It read, "A king does not escape. He chooses when to leave." And below it, taped carefully, was a hand-drawn chessboard. All the pieces were in place, except the king. It was gone. The police launched roadblocks, airports were alerted, borders were scanned. But King had vanished like smoke. No security footage, no DNA trail, just a legend that had grown tenfold overnight. The prison system was humiliated. The media erupted. And the people? They whispered his name with awe and fear. The Great Escape wasn't just a prison break. It was a statement, a performance. And the world would never forget the night the king disappeared. The moment Amir Zaman, the king, vanished, the world changed. The prison was locked down, the staff interrogated, and dozens suspended. News channels lit up with headlines screaming, "Most dangerous criminal escapes high-security prison." Social media exploded with theories, memes, and fear. But for the authorities, it wasn't entertainment. It was war. The police launched the biggest manhunt in the country's recent history. Roadblocks went up across every major highway. Trains were stopped and searched. Drones swept rural areas. Ports, airports, and border crossings were flooded with officers, carrying King's face on wanted posters. But the problem wasn't finding him. The problem was chasing a ghost. King hadn't just escaped. He erased his trail like he'd never existed. But then, something strange started happening. 2 days after the escape, a package arrived at the warden's office. Inside was a chess piece, the king, along with a note. Still playing? A week later, a second clue appeared. This time, it was carved into the side of a remote truck stop bathroom door. "The first move was yours. The last will be mine." Wherever King was hiding, he was watching, mocking, turning the manhunt into a psychological game. Every few days, a new coded message surfaced. Numbers, coordinates, chess moves, riddles that referenced literature, prison codes, or old cases. Cyber experts were called in. Criminal profilers tried to predict his next move. But King was always one step ahead, leading them in circles. He wasn't just free. He was toying with them. One message stood out above all. It was left in an abandoned warehouse, painted across the wall in red. "You caged a lion. Now he walks among you." Tension rippled through every law enforcement agency. Some believed King had left the country. Others were sure he was still nearby, hiding in plain sight, watching the panic unfold. Rumors spread that he was recruiting again, rebuilding his network, planning something bigger, smarter. The public became divided. Some feared him, calling him a terrorist. Others idolized him, treating him like a modern-day Robin Hood or an anti-hero. Conspiracy forums lit up with wild ideas. King was protected by politicians, or he had an underground base, or he had died and everything was a myth. But deep down, the police knew the truth. King was alive, and he was planning. What haunted them most wasn't the fact that he escaped. It was that he left clues. He wanted them to know he was still out there, still thinking, still playing. He wasn't done. They had underestimated him once. They wouldn't make the same mistake again. But no matter how many officers they deployed or how many cameras they installed, there was one thing they couldn't stop: the king's shadow. It lingered everywhere, unseen, unfelt, but always there. And as long as his shadow remained, one question echoed in every officer's mind: is this just the beginning?